In the beginning, God, the love of our souls, the source of goodness, truth, and justice, a perfect kingdom of love and light. Until war broke out in heaven, through one fallen angel who broke God's perfect law. Lucifer coveted God's throne and authority, and deceived 1/3 of the angels to rebel against the Holy One. Since that time, Earth is a war zone, where the forces of light and darkness, good and evil, truth and deceit, battle it out in a life or death conflict. Are you just a spectator, or have you taken sides? Are you living the victorious life God intended for you to have? Let Marla Alona guide you through the truth of God's Word, that you may choose right, that you may have life and have it more abundantly, and that God's truth may bring you eternal life. Welcome to Setting the Record Straight, God's truth for this generation.
God bless you. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Marla Ilana of City Bible Group. I am so delighted you're back with me for this precious, beautiful study on Daniel 8, Eden Restored. We are going to delight ourselves in the Lord as we see Him giving this last generation yet more evidence of His faithfulness toward us and signs of His commitment, brothers and sisters, to keep His everlasting covenant with His people. For those of you listening for the first time, maybe someone sent you a link or you somehow chanced upon us. Let me give you 3 ways you can listen to this podcast. You can stream it from our website at CityBibleGroup.com. You can listen and watch on our YouTube channel. Go to your search window on YouTube and simply type in City Bible Group, all one word, City Bible Group channel. And that'll bring up this channel with approximately 80 or so videos. Number 3, you can listen on any of the major podcasting platforms: iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and many, many others. Daniel 8 is the first chapter of the portion of the book of Daniel that was sealed. The portion of the book of Daniel that was sealed is the portion that was written in Hebrew, chapters 8 through 12. Now, chapter 1 was written in Hebrew, and chapter 1 serves as an introduction, and it gives us the key, in fact, to understanding the Hebrew book of Daniel that was sealed. In chapter 8, the Lord gave Daniel a mysterious vision of a ram standing by a river being attacked by a he-goat. The vision is extremely critical as its significance carries through all the way to the end of the book of Daniel. And more importantly, this vision, its unfolding, the fulfillment of this prophecy, brothers and sisters, is in course of fulfillment even as we speak. The Archangel Gabriel gave Daniel an interpretation of the vision for the time of the end. Today, we're going to revisit that mysterious vision of the ram and the he-goat, and we're going to discover the precious, beautiful, encouraging truths that are coded in that vision for our generation. It's something that the Lord held in reserve for the very last generation. Now, we had already analyzed this vision in our series on the book of Daniel. We saw that it contained a very serious warning about the manner in which Satan is going to counterfeit Christ's second coming. Today, we're taking another pass at this vision because there's even more light and more precious revelation that the Lord wants us to have and be encouraged by. The Lord opened my eyes and He showed me that all the revelation, all the beautiful gems of truth were in the vision itself, and we needed to go and dig deep to find it. So let's get started. The vision of the ram and the he-goat. Let's make sure we're all up to speed on the vision. The vision is given in Daniel chapter 8. Let's simply read Daniel 8, 1 through 14. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and there, standing beside the river, was a ram which had 2 horns. 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand. But he did according to his will, and it became great. And as I was considering, suddenly a male goat came from the west, across the surface of the whole earth, without touching the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken, and in place of it 4 notable ones came up toward the 4 winds of heaven, and out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. And it grew up to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and some of the stars to the ground and trampled them. He even exalted himself as high as the prince of the host, and by him the daily was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Because of transgression, an army was given over to the horn to oppose the daily, and he cast truth down to the ground. He did all this and prospered. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that certain one who was speaking, "How long will the vision be concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot?" And he said to me, "For 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed." End of the vision. Now at this point, Daniel is a bit bewildered. He's trying to understand the meaning of the vision. And then the angel Gabriel stood before the prophet. Daniel now hears the voice of a man, and the voice came from between the banks of the Ulai River, where Daniel had seen the vision. We know this was Jesus speaking, because Jesus is the only man in Scripture who stands on the water. And Jesus asked the angel Gabriel to make the prophet understand the vision. So in the remainder of chapter 8, Gabriel explains to Daniel that the vision is for the time of the end, and that the ram represents the kings of Medo-Persia, and the he-goat represents the king of Greece. Gabriel also introduces Antichrist as appearing in the latter days and doing great evil against God and God's people. However, he said, Antichrist will be broken without hand, meaning that a divine power, not a human power, will defeat him. Daniel was so astonished at the vision, as well as the interpretation of the vision, that he fainted, and he was even sick for a few days. Now, why did Daniel react so strongly? Because he couldn't stand the thought that his people might suffer such brutal persecution by Antichrist during what he believed would be 2,300 days, which in literal time would have been approximately close to 6.5 years. Not quite, but just under 6.5 years. Gabriel comes back in the following chapters, chapter 9, chapter 10, and chapter 11, to further clarify the meaning of the vision, particularly the timeline, which he clarifies in Daniel 9. So we see, brothers and sisters, that this vision is the very core of the Hebrew book of Daniel, the portion of the book of Daniel that was written in Hebrew and that was sealed until the time of the end. I'd like to invite you to listen to my previous podcasts. I have an entire series on the book of Daniel, and you'll get a lot of clarity on the structure of the book of Daniel, the part that was written in Aramaic, the part that was written in Hebrew, the part that was sealed, the part that was unsealed, how they all relate to each other. There's a particular podcast called Fascinating Structure of the Book of Daniel, but there are several other studies that I believe you'll find very helpful to better interpret the vision that Daniel received in chapter 8. Main principle of Bible interpretation. In order for us to be on sure ground as we take another pass at interpreting this vision, let's quickly review some principles of Bible interpretation. Number 1, the Bible interprets itself. This is the core, fundamental principle in order to correctly interpret Scripture. The Bible interprets itself. We don't bring in any interpretations for symbols that are not already given or already explained within the Bible. The Bible says, knowing this first, that no prophecy of the Scripture is of any private interpretation, for the prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. That's 2 Peter 1, verses 20 and 21. So, who can give meaning to a symbol, for example, that we find in the Bible? The Bible itself, through context. We allow the context to give us the meaning of the symbol. Possibly the prophet may tell us what the meaning of the symbol is, and or a heavenly messenger, such as an angel, can give us the interpretation of the symbol. There is another way, which is the line by line, precept by precept, where we go and we compare different passages of Scripture where the symbol might be used. And it may help shed light, but remember that a same symbol may have a different meaning based on the context. So the lion in one context may represent Babylon, the kingdom of Babylon and King Nebuchadnezzar, but in another context, the lion may represent the devil roaring like a lion, or it may even represent Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. This is why we need to take the context as a very foundational element in defining what the meaning of a symbol is.
Setting the record straight.
If we do all of these things that I'm saying we ought to do, it means that we do not apply extraneous contemporary meanings for the symbols. An example of what we shouldn't do is to say, referring, for example, to the vision that Daniel had in chapter 7, where he saw the 4 beasts rising out of the sea. Well, what we don't do is we don't say that the lion is the UK. We don't say that the bear is Russia. We don't say that the leopard is the alliance between Germany and France. Why? Because that is not in the Bible. Those are contemporary meanings, extraneous meanings to the Bible, and therefore it is not proper methodology to apply those meanings, to bring that into the Bible. No, we do not bring anything into the Bible. The Bible explains itself.
You're listening to Setting the Record Straight, God's truth for this generation.
In this particular case, we take the interpretation provided by the Bible that the first beast, the lion, is Babylon. That corresponds to the head of gold on the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in a dream. It tells us that the bear is Medo-Persia, and the leopard is Greece, and the last beast is Rome, the kingdom that was different from the others and much fiercer than any of the others. So when studying one passage of Scripture, let me repeat, context, the prophet himself or herself, a heavenly messenger such as an angel, or comparing different passages of Scripture, line upon line, precept upon precept, we glean additional information that may shed light on the passage that we're studying. Now, I stress this point, and I maybe belabored it a little bit, but the reason is that there are several incorrect interpretations of the prophecies in the book of Daniel, including by Adventist Bible students and Bible scholars. I am not pointing fingers or casting stones upon anyone. None of us is immune to error. We're all learning together, and particularly with prophecy, there is a very high margin of error. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we need to play by this rule of the Bible being its own interpreter, and when we do that, we greatly minimize the risk of error. Number 2, there's another guideline that will help us to interpret the Bible and interpret Bible prophecy correctly. This guideline is given by Sister Ellen White in the book Education. Let me read. The central theme of the Bible, the theme about which every other in the whole book clusters, is the redemption plan, the restoration in the human soul of the image of God. The burden, I'm skipping down too, the burden of every book and every passage of the Bible is the unfolding of this wondrous theme, the plan of redemption. If we keep this in mind, we won't forget that Jesus is the focus of the entire Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, and Jesus is the focus of all Bible prophecy. Any prophetic interpretations that don't have Jesus as the center are off-center. They are not accurate. And this is why I disagree with some interpretations which have been given of this vision in Daniel 8, interpreting that the vision refers to Syria, Iran, Iraq, wars in the Middle East. Now, these may very well all be happening right now, but I don't believe they're the fulfillment of this prophecy. I may be wrong, brothers and sisters. I'm just giving you my view based on this methodology that I apply of letting the Bible interpret itself. Number 3, the historicist school of prophetic interpretation, which we Adventists apply when we interpret prophecy, affirms that when the context is symbolic, we reckon time as prophetic time. That is, we apply the year for a day principle. When the context is literal, meaning there are no symbols, no apparent symbols, well, we reckon the time as being literal also, a day for a day. So symbolic context, prophetic time, a day for a year. When the context is literal, we reckon the time as literal. That is, a day for a day. Now, let me introduce an exception to this rule. Let's take Daniel 12 as an example. In Daniel 12:11, the 1290-day prophecy that has been sealed until the end of time, we're in the process of unveiling that prophecy, even as I speak. We're just now beginning to understand that in that particular verse and in the entire chapter of Daniel 12, there are quite a few symbols. There's quite some symbolism that needs to be unveiled. Why? Because the Lord was preserving and keeping these prophecies for the last generation. So there's a lot of meaning that is hidden, that is coded in the different verses. And that has not been revealed until our generation, not because we're smarter than anybody else, but simply because the time has come for these prophecies to be unveiled. Therefore, we take the 1290-day prophecy, we take the 1260 prophecy, and the 1335-day prophecy, all these 3 very key timelines that we find in Daniel 12, we find them to be literal. The context is literal, or so we believed, right? And so we apply literal time. However, recently, brothers and sisters, the Lord has been unveiling symbolism and coded meaning even in what we thought to be literal. Are you with me? In what we thought to be literal, we are finding layers of meaning in the words and in the symbols being used. Therefore, we might ask ourselves, wait a minute, this is couched in symbolism. Should we apply the day for a year principle? And the answer is no. Why? Because when Daniel 12 starts, it starts with Michael standing up. Immediately, the first verse sets the context. It sets the context as being the very end of time. If the context is the very end of time, brothers and sisters, do we have time to apply a day for a year principle? Do we have time? Do we have another 1290 years ahead of us? No, clearly not. Therefore, the context is defining the use of literal time, even though there may be layers of symbols that we're only now beginning to decode in Daniel 12, but we still apply time as being literal because The beginning of the chapter sets the time context as being the very time of the end when probation closes. So clearly, brothers and sisters, we're not talking about years, we are talking about days. Now, I made that little parenthesis there, but I think it's important for what we're going to see in Daniel chapter 8. The context of the Daniel 8 vision. What is so fascinating about the vision of the ram and the he-goat in Daniel 8 is that this vision is set in two distinct contexts. We'll see that these two contexts are not contradictory. The Bible never contradicts itself. Instead, these two contexts are complementary, and the Lord is layering them on, one on top of the other, to give richer meaning to each of the symbols. The first context, the Garden of Eden. The first context is given by the prophet Daniel as he begins to write out the vision. Let's read again, Daniel 8, verses 1 and 2. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that appeared to me the first time. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking, that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. There are two things being established here, time and space. There's a time element and there's a geographical element in the opening verse of the chapter. Number one, the easy one first, space. Geographically, the prophet is in Shushan in the province of Elam. Elam is situated in the territory of the Garden of Eden. And Elam, by the way, is spelled E-L-A-M. And the reason I'm not pronouncing it Elam, as we probably would in English, right? Just like we pronounce Eden, we would probably pronounce Elam. But there's a reason why I'm not pronouncing it that way. I'm pronouncing it the Hebrew way, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Second, Daniel saw himself by the river Ulai. So he sees himself as in Shushan, in the province of Elam, and then he sees himself by the river Ulai. The Greeks called this river the Coasps River. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Today, the Kirka, which is an affluent of the Tigris River. Why is this significant, brothers and sisters? Where am I going with this? Listen closely. The Tigris River was one of the 4 rivers flowing out of the Garden of Eden. The Tigris divided into 2 streams. The eastern stream was the Ulai River, where Daniel saw himself. And my reference for this is Smith's Bible Dictionary, 1863. So in the same verse, we get 2 witnesses that the geographical context being established here is the Garden of Eden. We have Elam, the province of Elam, and we have the river Ulai. So 2 witnesses that were in the Garden of Eden. Second, the more complex element is timing. So let's now consider the various time pointers related to the vision. First, when Daniel writes in the first verse of the chapter that he saw the vision in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, this is telling us that the Babylonian kingdom is on the decline and its downfall is near. What does that mean? The dance of the 4 successive empires is about to begin. So far, only Babylon has been dancing, right? Babylon has been in power, but now the reign of King Belshazzar is soon to collapse, soon to be given over to the Medo-Persians, and therefore the dance of the 4 beasts, the 4 successive world empires, is about to begin. Second, when Daniel overhears the 2 holy ones speaking, that is Jesus and Gabriel, Jesus says, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. This prophecy is known as the 2300-day prophecy, which has been reckoned in prophetic time. Why? Because as I described earlier, because it's found in a context of heavy symbolism. Daniel 9 gives us the beginning event, the starting event for the timeline of this 2300 years. This prophecy has already been fulfilled, as we know. It began in the year 457 BC at the same time that the 70-week prophecy of Daniel 9 started, and it ended in 1844 with 2 big events. taking place in heaven. Jesus moving into the most holy place, and Jesus beginning his work of judgment, starting by the judgment of the dead. Now you might wonder, wait a minute, didn't Gabriel tell Daniel that this vision was for the time of the end? Yes, brothers and sisters, but in the historicist interpretation of Bible prophecy, the first time of the end starts in the year 1798, when the Antichrist power receives the deadly wound, and we reckon that there is another time of the end, the very, very, very last time of the end, and we're going to see that right now.
You're listening to Setting the Record Straight, God's truth for this generation.
The third time element, when Jesus asks Gabriel to help Daniel understand the vision, the first thing Gabriel says is, "Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision." That's Daniel 8:17. Then again, in verse 19, Gabriel says, "Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be." Let me read that again. "I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be." So brothers and sisters, here we're faced with a context in which Babylon is about to fall. That was literal Babylon in Daniel's time. Then there's a second time element which is given, where we analyze and interpret the vision and this timeline as being prophetic time. That is, we apply a day for year principle, and that prophecy, that timeline, I should say, has already been fulfilled. And then we get to a third timeline, which is given by Gabriel very emphatically, that this vision is for the very time of the end. Not the first time of the end, which starts in 1798, but for the very, 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 very end of time, the last end of the indignation. Now, the second application, last end of the indignation, will be in literal time. Why? Again, because when you get to the last end of the indignation, there's no more time for a 2300-year timeline, right? Regardless of how symbolic the context may be, there's just not enough time. We've run out of time. There's no more prophetic time, as Sister White declared, but we are working in literal time. Now, there's another reason why we get a second witness, why this prophecy should be reckoned in literal time. That is because in Daniel 8, 13, and 14, the angel Gabriel actually uses the expression evenings and mornings. Instead of saying days in the Hebrew, Daniel said evenings and mornings. That expression, evenings and mornings, does two things. Number one, it takes us back to the book of Genesis, right? It takes us back to creation week, takes us back to the Garden of Eden. That is clearly Genesis language. And number two, evenings and mornings signals literal days, just as creation was in literal days. So this prophecy is given in literal days, not prophetic days. For the rest of today's study, we'll be focusing primarily on the interpretation of the vision, and we'll address the time element in another study. The second context is the sanctuary. We just read about the two holy ones speaking, and Gabriel asking, how long will the vision be concerning the daily and the transgression of desolation, the giving of both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? Then Jesus answered, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. So clearly, brothers and sisters, clearly, this vision has to do with the sanctuary. Therefore, the sanctuary is the other aspect of the context of this passage, of this vision, by which we can define the various symbols. Now, what we're going to do in our study today is what the Lord did in His Word, and that is we're blending the two contexts because, as I said, they're totally complementary. The Garden of Eden context and the sanctuary context are being layered on top of each other. Now listen closely. There's a distinction. There's a distinction I want you to make between these two contexts. They may be complementary, they may be blended, but there's a subtlety I want you to catch here. The Garden of Eden refers to the succession of world kingdoms until the restoration of God's kingdom. It has a stronger focus on the territory of the kingdom. Are you with me? That's why Daniel was stressing the geography, because the Garden of Eden refers to the territory of God's kingdom. That is going to be reclaimed. The sanctuary, on the other hand, is about the plan of salvation. It has a stronger focus on the subjects of the kingdom. These are the two dimensions, brothers and sisters, of what's going to happen in the end time. Plan of salvation equals souls, equals the subjects of the kingdom. So together, these two visions, the vision of the territory and the vision of the souls, right? The battle for the souls, these two visions, these two contexts combine to give us the full view of what will happen at the time of the end when Jesus comes to destroy all world kingdoms and restore the scepter of power to the throne of God, reclaiming both the territory and the subjects of his kingdom. The ram and the he-goat. Let's interpret the symbolism of the two animals first. Both are sanctuary animals used in sanctuary rituals and services. The ram was a sacrificial animal. It needed to be without blemish so that it could be offered daily during the morning and evening sacrifice. The ram itself could not make atonement for sin. It always pointed to Christ's propitiation for our sins. Therefore, the ram represents Jesus, the Lamb that takes away the sin of the world. Now, question, do we have a second witness that this ram actually represents Jesus? Yes, we do. In the Hebrew book of Daniel, every single time Jesus appears to the prophet Daniel, Jesus is standing by a river or on the river. We see that in Daniel 8:16, Daniel 10:4-6, and Daniel 12, verse 7. This is why the ram also appears standing beside the river. That's Daniel 8, verse 3. So clearly, we have two witnesses that this ram represents Jesus. The goat. The goat had two possible functions in the sanctuary services. Like the ram, it was a sacrificial animal. However, the goat played a very special role in the Day of Atonement ceremony. Once a year during the fall, the high priest entered the most holy place to cleanse the sanctuary of sin during the Day of Atonement ceremony. Two goats were involved in this holy day. The Lord's goat was offered as a sacrifice for the sins of the congregation. The other goat, called Azazel, was chosen to be the scapegoat who would bear on its head the sins of the congregation of Israel. At the end of the ritual cleansing of the most holy place, the high priest would come out and would place all the sins of the congregation on the head of the scapegoat. The scapegoat would be loosed in the wilderness, bearing the symbolic responsibility for all the sins of the congregation. Now again, this scapegoat could not atone for sins. Number one, because no animal could atone for sin. Every sacrificial offering pointed forward to the perfect sacrifice, the one-time sacrifice of Messiah. But number two, it couldn't atone for sin because there was no shedding of blood. And the Bible says, without shedding of blood, there is no remission of sin. So in any event, the scapegoat could never atone for sin. It simply bore the responsibility for sin. It carried the sin on its head. And brothers and sisters, that scapegoat represents Satan. Why? Because the type, which is the goat, represents the antitype, which is Satan. Why again? Because at the end of the antitypical Day of Atonement, the real Day of Atonement, Jesus will come back to the earth to place all the sins of God's people upon Satan's head. This will crush Satan's head, fulfilling the Lord's curse that he put upon the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and that we read in Genesis 3:15. Question again, do we have a second witness that the goat represents Satan? Yes, we do. In Daniel 8:21, when Gabriel is giving Daniel the interpretation of the vision, he uses the word Sair to describe the he-goat. The word Sair in Hebrew means male or hairy, but it also means satyr. A satyr is a demon. Let me read you a definition of satyr provided by Wikipedia. One of a class of lustful, drunken, woodland gods with a small g. In Greek art, I'm still reading from Wikipedia, in Greek art, they were represented as a man with a horse's ears and tail, but listen closely, but in Roman representations as a man with a goat's ears, tail, legs, and horns. End of quote. So clearly then, brothers and sisters, the satyr is one of Satan's many disguises. So we have a second witness that clearly this goat represents Satan. The Garden of Eden. Let's go back to Daniel 8:2. I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan the citadel, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. Elam means eternity, something that continues forever and ever. This is why one of the Lord's names is Yahweh Olam, Jehovah Olam, which means the eternal God. Therefore, brothers and sisters, in symbolic language, this province was meant to last forever. The province of Elam was located east of Babylon and northeast of the lower Tigris River. So we are clearly in Garden of Eden territory. We said earlier that the river Ulai is an affluent of the Tigris River, one of the 4 rivers of the garden. Now it's interesting, there's another connection with the word Elam as a name, and the name Elam appears prominently among many repatriates going back to Jerusalem, going back to Judah, with Zerubbabel and Nehemiah after the Babylonian exile. Now, let's go back to the book of Genesis. We said that everything in this vision is sending us back to Genesis. The language is sending us back to Genesis, the geographical context. So let's go there and let's read in Genesis chapter 2 about the rivers that we find in the garden. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became 4 river heads. Now it mentions in a couple of verses there, it mentions some of the rivers, which we don't know. These rivers are very mysterious. No one knows where these rivers are today. And then we get to verse 14, where it says, the name of the 3rd river is Hiddekel. Hiddekel is mentioned in the book of Daniel. Hiddekel is another name for the Tigris River. The river that we know as the Tigris River today used to be called the Hiddekel. This river appears in Daniel 10. Jesus appears on the Hiddekel. So let me read that again. The name of the 3rd river is Hiddekel. It is the one which goes toward the east of Assyria. And the 4th river is the Euphrates. And of course, the Euphrates River is the very famous river on which Babylon sat. Ancient Babylon sat on the Euphrates River.
You're listening to Setting the Record Straight, God's truth for this generation.
In antiquity, rivers represented power, the power to sustain life. Many large cities were built on rivers or very close to rivers. Let me give you 3 examples. We have Egypt on the Nile, we have Babylon on the Euphrates, which I just mentioned, and we have Nineveh. Nineveh was built on the Tigris River or the Hiddekel River. So these are just 3, I think, very powerful examples that demonstrate that rivers in the Bible represent power. They're a form of power. They're a manifestation of power. Now, make this connection here. Powers in the Bible are also symbolized by horns. So if rivers equal power and horns equal power, brothers and sisters, A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C, therefore rivers equal horns. And we're going to see that momentarily, that one single horn that we see in the Garden of Eden, we're going to understand momentarily that the one single horn, the one river that flowed through the Garden of Eden, and then it became 4 rivers, we find an exact correlation on the head of the goat. We're going to study that in just a moment. I'm just maybe anticipating it here. I don't want you to miss this connection. The goat had a single horn on his head, correlates back to the one river in the Garden of Eden. Then out of the goat's head, right, that large horn, the one single large horn is broken. It becomes four horns. Brothers and sisters, this correlates back perfectly to the one single river, which then becomes four rivers. Now, park that in your minds because we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. Rivers have great theological and biblical significance. They represent the river of life flowing underneath God's throne. They also represent transitions and points of passage for God's people, and rivers also divide or separate what's on one bank from what's on the other. The Lord placed one river in the Garden of Eden to irrigate the garden, and from there it became four rivers. God knew that man would sin and would lose the right to enter the garden, right? God knew the end from the beginning. So the Lord knew that man would sin and that man would cause the kingdom to be lost. The one river represents the authority that God gave Adam, the single authority, the single scepter of power, strong, that came from God's throne. God himself gave Adam that scepter of power to have dominion over the world. That correlates, brothers and sisters, to the single river. And then, brothers and sisters, man fell. Adam sinned. The sole kingdom, the sole authority that God gave Adam would be splintered. The four rivers, therefore, in the Garden of Eden, represent the four kingdoms which would successively dominate world history until Jesus comes to destroy all kingdoms and establish his everlasting kingdom. Let's read in Genesis 2, verse 8. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. This is why the ram comes from the east, pushing in the other three cardinal directions. So the ram comes from the east. He's pushing towards the north, the south, and the west. And the ram in the Garden of Eden, brothers and sisters, represents Adam, the Son of God, who lived in the east. We said Jesus is the ram. Jesus is the second Adam. Therefore, the first Adam is also represented by the ram. Now, the he-goat came from the west, the opposite direction. Why? Because Satan is always rising up in opposition against anything and everything that God establishes. So, to recap, the single horn on the head of the he-goat, which we read earlier, parallels the single river in the Garden of Eden. What does the single horn, single river represent? Well, you heard my version. Let me read it to you from the Bible. What angel Gabriel said to Daniel in Daniel 8, verse 21. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. So this is the angel Gabriel. We're in agreement. He's saying the single horn that is between the eyes of the he-goat is the first king. Who's the first king, brothers and sisters? The first king is no less than Adam himself. In Genesis 1, verse 28, God gave Adam and Eve this instruction: be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Subdue it. Reign over it, in other words. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Brothers and sisters, Adam was the first king. The single horn on the he-goat represents the original, authentic scepter of power, filled with godly power, filled with divine power that Adam received from the Lord. God gave Adam authority over the earth, to be its steward, to name the cattle, to name the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air. When Adam sinned, The consequence was that his scepter of power defaulted over to Satan, or more exactly, it was usurped by Satan. All genuine authority stems from the throne of God. God is the only legitimate source of authority in the universe. When Adam sinned, he became Satan's servant, according to Romans 6:16, which says, "Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one slaves whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death or of obedience leading to righteousness?" Thus, brothers and sisters, Adam lost the scepter of power, and he gave Satan the legal right to usurp it. Now, this vision in Daniel 8 is describing how Satan waxed great on the earth after the flood. And these usurper kingdoms began to emerge, starting with Nimrod, right, the builder of the Tower of Babel, followed by Egypt, then Assyria. But the chronology of world kingdoms that we find in the book of Daniel starts with Babylon.
Setting the record straight.
The four horns that grew out of the goat's head represent the same four kingdoms represented throughout the book of Daniel. They represent Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. God does not change references midstream. These four horns do not represent Syria. They do not represent Iran, Iraq. No. God is consistent in the kingdoms that are represented by the four horns, because we see the four beasts, right, in Daniel 7. We see the four metals on the statue in Daniel 2. And we come to Daniel 8, we have four horns. Brothers and sisters, these are the same four kingdoms. We do not change frameworks in the middle of the book. We are consistent throughout the book. God is a God of order. God is consistent throughout the book. Whenever you see the four, we're talking about the four same kingdoms. Because the transmission line of the usurped scepter of power was illegitimate, the angel Gabriel says the following: "As for the broken horn and the four that stood up in its place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power." So the broken horn, the single notable horn that was in the middle of the goat's head, middle of his eyes rather, we said it represents Adam. It represents the first king. It represents the original undefiled kingdom, the Garden of Eden, which was the headquarters, the government, if you will, of the entire earth. The single horn is broken. 4 will stand up in its place, and they represent the 4 kingdoms. Let me read again, Daniel 8:22. 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. Why? They do not have the authority that comes from the throne of God. These are usurper kingdoms. They do not have the authority that God gave to Adam. Only Adam had that authority. Only the first kingdom had that power. These are transgressor kingdoms. This is why in Daniel 8 verse 23, Gabriel calls these kingdoms the transgressors. They are illegitimate. They are usurper nations. They are transgressors. They do not have the legitimate authority that stems from the throne of God. Their scepter of power was given to them by Satan. This is an illegitimate chain of command, if you will. This is an illegitimate succession line of kingdoms, totally illegitimate. Now, out of the horn that represented Rome stood up the little horn of Daniel 7, right? The same little horn. We find him in Daniel 7. He carries over into Daniel 8. We know this little horn represents the papacy. Now, the fact that the little horn grows out of the head of the he-goat confirms, brothers and sisters, or maybe is confirmed by what we read in Revelation 13, verse 2. The dragon gave him, referring to the Antichrist beast, the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. The Bible is telling us unambiguously that Antichrist receives his power, throne, and authority from Satan. We read it in Revelation 13, verse 2. We read it again in the vision where the little horn springs up. Out of the head of the goat comes this little horn. So that means that the goat, the he-goat, Satan himself, gives Antichrist his throne, his power, and great authority. I want you to listen to how the angel Gabriel describes the emergence of Antichrist and how Antichrist comes in sequence after the four previous illegitimate kingdoms. Let's read Daniel 8, verses 23 and 24. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their fullness. Now remember, these kingdoms are transgressing because they're holding a usurped scepter of power that is handed down to them from the previous power. So in successive moments in history, these empires rise, they have their moment of glory, and then they fall and they hand over the baton of power to the next emerging kingdom. That's how this works, right? This is Satan's illegitimate chain of command. So let's read. Let me just go back to reading here. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors, these four kingdoms, have reached their fullness, a king shall arise. And this is Antichrist now. Listen closely. A king shall arise, having fierce features, who understands sinister schemes. His power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. Third witness, but not by his own power. He receives his power, seat, and authority from Satan. He shall destroy fearfully, and shall prosper and thrive. He shall destroy the mighty, and also the holy people. Antichrist, being subjected to the destroyer himself, the destroyer is Satan. Therefore, Antichrist is also a destroying power. Antichrist is depicted as the fourth beast in Daniel 7 that destroys the whole earth.
Please be sure to come back and join us for part 2 of this study, called Book of Daniel 8, Eden Restored.
If you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart one believes unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Thank you for listening to Setting the Record Straight, God's truth for this generation. If you've been blessed by this program, we encourage you to share it with others. To ask any question related to this Bible study or any other spiritual matter, email us at info@CityBibleGroup.com. To find out more, visit our website at CityBibleGroup.com.
Hi, I'm Marla Ilana. Thank you so much for studying God's Word with me. Please click on the subscribe button below and you'll be blessed with many more powerful truths for our generation. Jesus is coming soon. Are you ready?